Hey everyone, it is James from Tin Robot Games. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. So here is my update. It's been a couple of weeks since my last one, and although we do the podcast on a weekly basis, I try to break it up and do at least one update a month on kind of the progress of Tin Robot Games, kind of where we're going as a company, where we're at in our design process with our games. Buckle up, because we got a lot of updates in this particular this particular stream. So I'm going to cover off where we're at with Cities of Venus. We've had some prototypes come in from the factory to sign off on, so we're going to review those together. I've pre-opened those just because it literally took me 15 minutes to get all the tape off the box and off the different components, and that's not great viewing, just watching somebody cutting something open. But now I have them all open. We're going to go through them together. We're going to talk a little bit about tanks but no thanks, updates on Hamsters versus Hippos. We're going to talk about time splicers, and sneak peek on bunny drops, which is another game that we're adding to our repertoire, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I don't actually have any artwork to show on it, but it's maybe I have some stuff I can show, but some of that's going to be kind of teasing out in the next little bit as well, and that's one that we're going to have as part of our small box campaign next year. All right, let's jump into it. So Cities of Venus. Last we had talked kind of together. We had talked about the molds that we had sent off for both the first player marker as well as the mechs, the dice mechs, and had signed off and sent that off. The next step was to then get an actual production sample back, as well as see how the ink washing will look. So we're going to go through that today. Also, the player boards. People have been following me know that I am just absolutely crazy hyper-focused on getting these boards right. And I got another prototype from the plant that they've done some different thickness in certain areas. I think we've solved the flat board. So I think these boards are flat. Some other tweaks we want to go through, but we're going to go through that. So let's start off with, I think we'll start off with the boards. So the 4-layer boards, I'm going to take you through the progression. So this was the first kind of reviewer samples that we had done that were rushed, and this is last fall. And as you can see, this one's actually not bad. It's kind of been in the box for quite a while, so it's been held flat, but these were a bit warped, but they're really thin. And you'll notice right here, if I can kind of bring up to the camera, this little part here was kind of bubbled out, and then over here, same thing, kind of bubbled out around the holes and stuff, because this piece was really thin. Cards going in and out is a little bit difficult getting the cards in and out. So we wanted to go thicker on those. When I was at Origins, the plant had Sky Game, who's our manufacturer, met us at Origins, and they brought kind of the next iteration of their attempts to kind of address some of the things that I was concerned about. And they came with this. And this one, much thicker, so the warping in the individual locations solved. Cards sliding in and out, no problem. I don't know if I have a card here I can use, because they are all over there. But I'll just use a different card. I think these are the same size. I think. Let me check. Are those the same size? Maybe not. All right. I'll have to grab a different card. But the cards slide in and out. I don't have one near me. Ah! Oh, wait a second. We'll pull this bad boy down. Let's take a look at the card. Excellent. Okay, we have cards. I'll use these cards. This is an example. So, let's find one where we've actually got some stuff that'll show through the window. And we'll go with this one. All right. So, give you an idea of how they kind of slid in and out. Card would go in and slide in, and you can see how they would kind of show. These are older prototype cards, so the windows don't line up. But it gives you an idea of how they basically slide in and out, right? They slide in very, very well. But I was still a little bit, I wouldn't say irked, but still said, hey, we can do better. And if you look at this board, it's still kind of curved. It's got this kind of curved warp in it. When it lays on a table, it's definitely more prominent. And that will just get worse over time, right? As you sit in the box, if there's no weight on both sides, kind of keeping them flat, they will warp. So the plants continue work on it, and they just came back with another iteration. And I always get concerned every time I get another version back where it's thicker, because I can feel already this is a heavier board. If I times that by 6, that could add a lot of weight to the game. So I'm going to be cognizant of that. We're not going to come and ask for extra shipping costs or anything like that. Like if there's any changes, we'll eat it. But on my end, it's something that I'm cognizant of, right? I can also see where the clamp marks where they've clamped this down. So I've already talked to the plant about that, saying, hey, let's just make sure that these are, because these were done by hand, these clamp marks aren't going to be on there. But when I look at this board, it is flat, which is exactly what I wanted. And I haven't put a card in these yet, so let's do this live on air. And you never know, sometimes things, oh, baby, does that ever slide in nice? Look at that. Smooth as butter. A little bit of wiggle room in there to negotiate the card, but not so much that it's an issue. I mean, that is a work of art. Uh-oh. Trouble in paradise. Ah, so close. All right, I'm going to check the rest of the slots. That one works well. I think up here works well. And down here works well. Now here's my comment on this, and it's more of a commentary on manufacturers in general. If it was me and I owned a manufacturing plant and I was only sending 2 samples to my client to look at, to say here's what we can do, we think we've solved it, there is 0 chance that I wouldn't test that first before sending that to the other side of the planet. But here we are. And I'm going to do this right now because, again, transparency. It doesn't slide up. Oh, if I push it really hard, it does. But it shouldn't go like that. It should go smooth. That's a problem. Was there another one? The other one's over there. I'll test the other one later. But that's a no-go. And you would know that if you had tried it. So why wouldn't you try all of these before you sent it? This is what I don't understand. Sky Game, I absolutely love you, but this is why every single time I go through the entire process again and assume that it's the first time me looking at this, and assume that they have assumed nothing. Because I've been burnt so many times in the past in manufacturing in general, and not even just board games, but other things I've manufactured, where you sign off on things and then you assume that the next increment is just going to improve on where you just were, and you don't have to revisit the things you had just already solved. That is a fatal flaw, and this is my advice to anybody that gets into the production side or the manufacturing side of their games. So instead of just designing, but actually want to produce your games, make sure that you don't make those assumptions, because you will get burnt. 100% of the time you're going to get burnt, because it's happened to me so many times on projects where everything's signed off, or like, okay, now can you change this other thing over here that has nothing to do with what we just changed, and some way in that change, that original thing that was supposed to be fixed is now broken again. Not super bad, but again, that should go up smooth. That shouldn't be, you shouldn't have to force that. So that'll be some of my feedback to them. The other thing too is they didn't use the new die lines I sent them, because we have added a window up here in the food, and we've also added a window here in the water. Down over, there's gonna be a window here, because we have new abilities, new upgrades that are gonna pertain to those 2 departments, and we've added a lot. So the next iteration they make, we're gonna have to fix those and have those windows. I'm hoping, and I've asked them, I said, guys, I need samples for Essen. So I'm gonna be in Germany in October, first week of October. Swing by our booth. We're in the second hall, I believe. Tin Robot Games, come check us out. Love to say hi. You can interact with this game yourself. And at that show, I want to have the newest version possible of these boards, if we can. And so I want to have those windows there. Also, if possible, and I know it's tough to do with like a hand sample. I'm sorry if this light here keeps going from yellow to white. When you're doing 1 or 2 samples, it's very difficult to do linen finish. Linen finish is something you usually do at a full production level. So, but my intent is for these to be linen finish as well, just because I think that you're gonna have to give up on a little bit of the fact that you'll have some glare coming off it with linen finish. However, I think that the wear and tear will be much better on them if they have linen finish. They'll just they don't scuff as bad as if you don't have some kind of linen finish on there. But other than that, I think the boards, the thickness, and everything's solved. Now we just got to make sure just to fix that one thing of this card sliding up. I know what the issue is. It's how they glued it, because underneath here there's a layer with this little kind of slider under here that guides the card. So that's that game. So Cities of Venus, we're getting there. Progression, folks. Still on track. Everything is moving along swimmingly the way we expected. Quite frankly, the minis is moved faster than I thought. So my goal is to deliver this game early if I can. I've never been late on a campaign. Always been early, either on time or early, and this one I want to be early. Selfishly, for 2 reasons. One, if I can get this out in the summertime, then we'll be primed to do the sequel next fall. And then also, I think people will get a chance to kind of get into the lore of this universe we've created, and then hopefully be excited to continue on that journey with us. Okay, minis. 2 different minis we did. So I'm going to show you the original molds that I signed off on. So I signed off on, first, this is the mech. The dice mech, and these were I always like when I put the die in them, I found like it was a little loose, and I was like, these seem a little bit bigger than the initial molds we had. What I didn't understand is that when they do a proof of your mold, it is always about, I think it's like 4% bigger all the way around. And then what you do, hey, Steven just joined. What you do is when you go to the actual molds, then they create the case, and when the plastic goes on the inside, it gets down to the size it's supposed to be. That's the most eloquent I can be in explaining that. But anyways, so this is like 4% larger than the actual mech. They then created the actual size as models, and the first treatment of ink wash for us to sign off an ink wash. This is the ink washed mech mini. So if I put them side by each, you can see this one's just a straight gray plastic, standard gray plastic you have. This one is then gone through like an ink wash process. What the ink wash does is it's kind of like a rustic kind of treatment that they do to it, whereas literally like it's like a liquid ink that's kind of put on it and then kind of washed off. But the ink sticks in all those nooks and crannies and highlights all the details. And when you look at these, I mean, the ground is more detailed in this one than this one. It's the exact same model. It's just this one has had that ink wash treatment. So I like it. I like it a lot. I think it's good. I can see on the bottom there's like a little bit of a splash of ink. I don't know if that's because this one was done by hand. That's kind of some of the discussion I'll have. Not a big deal. That's on the bottom of the thing anyways, and it's not like that kind of wipes off. But I'll ask more the question of, hey, is that kind of standard or not? I'll talk to some other colleagues in the industry. But in terms of the ink wash itself, I think these look really good. So that one I'm happy with. Of course, again, as I just said, you want to double check, is everything okay? So I can't just assume that this is okay and it's going to fit the die. I actually physically put a die in it and say, okay, the die does actually fit. Okay, we're good. And it fits nicely. The next thing I do is I put the man in, right? I put the little V-knot in. Does he fit? He fits perfectly. So I do that to make sure that, again, you never know. You could assume you're just looking at the ink wash and then there's something wrong with the die where the die goes in. You didn't double check that, you sign off, and guess what? That goes into production, and then it's my fault, not theirs, because I signed off. So I think we're in good shape on this one. The first player marker was like a wow. So this is the first player marker. And what I was explaining on one of our last videos, this is actually 3 pieces. So the claw holding the arm is one piece. This elbow is a piece. Actually, I think it's 4. I think this base is a piece, and then it kind of, or no, sorry, this is part of the main arm, and then it kind of plugs into this base. And then they they assemble it and fuse the plastic at the plant level. So the first image they sent me, it was a little off kilter. It wasn't glued properly. And so my feedback on that was, that's not going to fly. That's got to be fixed. They went back and forth. They got that adjusted. So, okay, we've solved that issue. Now here's the ink wash for you to look at. The ink wash, man. My God, does it look good. Look at that. Like the detail. See the hatch on that canister on the side? And all the little bolts in the arm and stuff. Like the ink wash. Like, I'm glad we did ink wash. It just, oh. If I look excited, it's because I'm super excited. It just looks awesome. Like, you wouldn't even need to paint this. This is good to go on the table. I know some people still paint it anyway, but man, does that look super awesome. And all the detail pops. Even on the front, there's that Cities of Venus glyph that's on the front there, right in between the claw. You can kind of see it there. That even shows up kind of better than it does here. So I'm super happy with the ink washes. So I'm going to sign off on the ink wash. Ink wash, I think we're good to go. I got that one question about that one little splash on the bottom of the mech. Other than that, minis are pretty much ready to go. And so the next step is to actually place the order. The challenge I have right now is when I place, I got to get the timing. And I think it takes like 12 weeks from when I pull the trigger on the manufacturing. But I'm nervous because I want to make sure I make enough, but I don't make too much, if that makes sense. Our late pledges have been going bananas. We've booked a lot of games in the late pledge, and it's still going. So I think what I might do is after Essen, because we're going to be showing this at Essen, and we'll have a lot of people probably late pledge there as well. That we will, I think at that point I'll have a good handle. Okay, what's the numbers going to be? Because that's kind of where the next big bump would be, I guess, in numbers that'll come in, where then we can order the mechs, and we'll order these minis, and we'll order them for all the games, which is the 4-player and the 6-player games. Of course, the retail version, which hasn't been flushed out yet, but you got to think about these things ahead of time. But the retail version is not going to have the minis anyway, so won't really impact that. This is just for the Kickstarter exclusive backers. So very excited where we land on that. So we are right on track. Things are going well. Still working on the cards. We added a lot more cards than I had anticipated, which is a good thing for people getting the game, because the sheer amount of variety is there's a lot of variety there, especially in the events. Like, every time we play the game is going to be a completely different set of events. Every time we play the game is going to be a completely different set of innovations you come across. We have some really cool ones. A lot of smart people have been kind of weighing in saying, hey, have you considered doing this, this, and this? And we've added a lot that we hadn't had in our list that we've added, because it's a no-brainer. They make sense. So even Cuties of Venus, which came up during the campaign, we've worked that in, and it's kind of funny how we worked that in. So stay tuned for that as well. All right, so that is Cities of Venus. I think it makes sense to probably jump over to Time Splicers, since it's kind of part of the same universe. Welcome, David. Melanie as well. So with Time Splicers, we made a couple tweaks, and the biggest tweak we made, and if I can find them here, is we added another full era. So we had, we went to kind of the Singularity was kind of the last era. The Singularity is still the last era. But what we did is we added one era before that, which was Solar Expansion. I know I'm smiling because I'm excited. So for Solar Expansion, this is where the tie-in is, my friend. So think about this. This is like, there's the AI is chasing you through time. You're trying to keep the Singularity from happening. The AI is trying to stop you from doing that. It's a simple card game, so don't let me oversell this. But that's thematically what's happening. And that's the event on Earth, which causes us to lose contact with the cities on Venus, right? And that's what triggers the end game in the Cities of Venus, is you lose contact with Earth and you don't know why, right? So you have the last drop comes, and that's it. You're on your own. So Time Splicers is that event that happens on Earth. But to tie it in even better, we added solar expansion. And what is in solar expansion? It's pictures of the city of Venus. And each one is a little bit different. So this one here, you can see there's a piece of space debris that's blasting like right through the hull of the city. This one's just a typical day, nothing's happening. This one here has a drop coming in from the left. This one has a drop coming in from the right, or maybe it's left, the other one's right. So I'm looking at the camera here. So again, in this game, for each era, the artwork looks a little bit different depending on the timeline you're in. We also had a lot of great feedback. And this is an example where sometimes getting feedback is tough. And it's best not to overreact or dismiss it, right? So to give you an example, I was at a playtest night, and the way the feedback was delivered to me on Time Splicers was pretty blunt and didn't feel super good the way it came through. The person's comment was something to the effect of, why would you break the fundamental rules of game design in making this? Right? And so how you respond to that, and I've done a number of these now that I've got some pretty thick skin. So I usually take a breath. I got my notebook and piece of paper, and I say, well, what do you mean by that? I'm not sure I understand. Can you explain that in a different way? And they said, well, there's a dead hand, right? So we made an opportunity where we had, if you're in before you could get stuck in a timeline, and then you're just collecting cards until you can finally get something that gets you out, and it's possible you can't get out of that timeline. And you can't collapse timelines if you can't get into another timeline where you have the cards to kind of match that timeline. So we had this mechanic we introduced where you jump out into kind of the portal that you've kind of spawned from. And that's kind of like this nexus out there that connects with all timelines. And you go there and you have to cook. It costs you a turn to go there. You have to wait a turn there, pick up a card. And then on your next turn, you get to come back. So what the person was getting at is, having a dead turn. A turn where you're just kind of waiting, doing nothing. Didn't come across in the most eloquent way. However, I wrote it down. I said, okay, thanks. Thank you for the feedback. And that's always should be the response when somebody gives you feedback. Thank you for your feedback. Let me think on it. I want to digest this a bit. Let you get away and kind of and think about it, right? And think about what do they mean by that, or what, is there something there? And I thought a lot about it, and she was right. She was right. And when I was able to strip it back and say, okay, what is she getting at in here, and how can I adjust this so that it makes the play enjoyable and it feels like the pacing is moving along and they still have some agency there. So we did a minor tweak, which was, okay, you can still jump out of your timeline into the Nexus, right? And I actually might call it the Nexus. That's actually a great title. I'm going to write that down. Into the Nexus. And then on your next turn, you can jump into a timeline right away. And you still pick up 2 cards, but you're not cooking a turn. So before, you're cooking a turn to kind of pick up these cards, but it was unnecessary for you to have to cook a turn. Now you can just jump out, and then on your next, with your turn again, you can jump back into wherever you want. And the penalty is you take 2 cards. And in some cases, you may want to take those 2 cards as a strategy to get kind of the combinations that you're trying to get. So, fun little story, but we created this Nexus card that will also be off to the side of the board that you can jump out into and then back. Another thing we had from GameCrafter, quite frankly as a placeholder, was these ginormous meeples. And I had ordered them by accident, and I meant to have smaller meeples, and I didn't look at the size, and I got these giant meeples. But every time I've played with people, I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to, don't worry about the meeples. We're going to replace those with like little Time Splicer kind of astronauts. And the feedback from people is, no, we like the meeples. Keep the meeples. So we might actually keep these. You have these acrylic meeples that are huge. They act as your players moving around the board. But they are kind of cool. And I think what I'll do is, before we get to production on this, we'll probably put that out to a vote to get people's thoughts. So, and then they have your cubes, which kind of match the acrylic as well. Use these two if you freeze a timeline when you jump out. which keeps an empty timeline from collapsing. You can kind of mark that it was you that did that, because when you come back in, then it automatically unfreezes. It's interesting as a game of, sometimes things happen by accident, but it ends up being something that, wow, that actually was serendipitous, because now it's actually something that we think works well with the game. And that's an example of that. This person's feedback, again, to any game designers out there, do your best just to nod your head and write it down, and do yourself a favor, kind of sleep on it and go back and think about it and try to think about the root of what they're getting to, because there's usually something in there you can use. I'm not saying take everybody's feedback at face value or as gospel, because everybody has an idea and an opinion, and often they're trying to turn a game into something that fits their gameplay style and something they want versus the game you have. But there's usually a nugget of something there you can use either on that game or another one. So that is Time Splicers. I'm very excited about Time Splicers. It is good to go. We're probably going to launch this as part of our small box campaign. Again, full disclosure, we got AI art in this one. It's got, well, there's I think 52 cards. There's 52 pieces of art in this game. Like, every card is different. So it is impossible to do that through commissioned art. There's no way this game would not lose a pile of money if we try to do art that way. So we may have to just suck it up and say, hey guys, full disclosure, this has AI art in it. If you guys want to still enjoy this game, understanding that, then here it is. Otherwise, if you don't support that, that's totally cool too. And we'll make that part of probably the small box campaign when we do that. Small box campaign, so far we've got 6 games lined up for that. And potentially a 7th, because we've got a colleague that's working on his game, which I think is probably going to be ready in time as well. And it'll fit that small box format as well. So that's kind of like this a la carte campaign we're looking at running, where, for one price you can choose 2 games or 3 games, say, for another price 4, another price 5, or deep savings if you take all 7 games. It's kind of like you pick and choose what you want based on your play style. All right, the next thing we're working on is Hamsters versus Hippos, which is a game that, for those of you who are not familiar with it, and again, my box cover's out of reach, but this is a game where we have these hamsters that are bouncing around, or you're hamsters and you're navigating this pond, and you have these tiles. It's a tile flipping game. It's a press your luck, trying to decide when you're going to get out of the pond. So you have you're trying to collect these lotus flowers. You have your little hamster can fall into the water, lose your turn, and worst case scenario, you flip over a hippo. You flip over a hippo, you're dead. He eats you and he takes all your lotus flowers until you're reincarnated on the next round. And it goes over 4 rounds. Very light, fun game. Plays very well as a gateway game and game starter. You can play with a lot of different ages. Fun with adults, but also obviously you can play this with kids, right? The only thing we do is when you play with kids, there's the one where you steal a flower from another player. We usually recommend taking that rule out for little kids, because they don't react as well as to take that kind of mechanics. But try to avoid these hippos. So this game here right now is we launched this a couple years ago. It was a Kickstarter campaign. It did well. James Freeman and Zeros on this. It's a large box. And what we decided to do was we're going to fit that into the same size box that Catnip Auction House is in, which is this guy here, this little box. So everything in that box actually fits in this box if we can get rid of the tiles, which take up so much room in the Hamsters vs. Hippos box. So what we decided to do was say, hey, why don't we move to cards instead? And these are what the cards look like. So to give you an idea, that's the entire stack of cards right there. And one of the benefits from this is you can easily shuffle. Now, it's one of the complaints we have from Hamsters vs. Hippos is you kind of have to do a table shuffle. So you lay them out on the table, you do this, and then you kind of arrange your tiles the way you need them. And you put the hippos off to the side you're going to add every time. Now you can literally just shuffle the cards really quick, deal them out into the grid, and bang into the game. The good news is those fit in this box, no problem. So the entire Hamsters vs. Hippos game now fits in this little box. So it's now part of our small box campaign. So I was glad to get that prototype from GameCrafter. Again, kudos to GameCrafter. Other than the fact they charge you double to rush your game, which really sucks, the print quality is really nice. And I would say it is actually even superior to some of the stuff you get as full production, large production runs out of China. So kudos to those guys. And I believe they make it all in the States. The other thing I had that we are working on is tanks, but no thanks. This was the very first game we ever launched. Yeah, I agree, David. They got amazing quality. This is the first game we ever launched. This is what started Tin Robot Games as a company, right? This started us on this whole journey. This is a game I made over 25 years ago now, pushing 30. And, I've learned a lot since we launched this game. And, number one is the artwork on the board. Definitely we could make a big improvement to it. The original game, we tried to keep it true to what we originally created, like in the 90s. And hindsight's 2020. Looking back, I'm thinking, why wouldn't have I just reskinned everything? So we're doing that for this one. So we had like these little wooden barriers, like little wood meeple type blocks act as the barriers. Now we have these hedgehogs, minis that you can paint. We had bases. So the bases look like this. They're just little wooden flags. Now we've got bases that are, if I can get this out here, hangers, right? So you got the hangers that your tanks come out of. Those act as your bases. In the playtesting we've been doing, the challenge we've had is that these pieces are way too big. So they literally cover the square on the board, but when you go with the opposite side of the board where you have a 3-player game, which is all hexagon based, these don't fit. They're too big. Likewise, the hedgehogs, which have octagon bottoms, on the opposite board where we have a hexagon based grid system, they kind of look weird. So we're going to make the bottom of these round so they fit better. We're going to bring down the size of those guys, man down, by about probably 20%. And the bases, I think we need to reduce these by, I'm thinking at least 25%. I know they look cool, but they're just too big on the board. And especially for the 3-player version, they don't even fit on the squares. So these are going to be reduced. And on the back too. When you look at the back, it's just solid in the back. So I'm going to have the same as we have here on this side on the back as well. So we have to reprint all these, which wasn't cheap. But we're going to do that so we have some great artwork for our Kickstarter campaign. The cards we have, of course, we've got the top secret cards. And then we reskin the artwork on the bonus powers to actually look like a weapons case. And on the other side, it looks like the inside of the case when you open it up. So that artwork, everything is ready to go. Got to get the minis done so that they work on the 3-player board. And then the Autonoma deck, I have to get the artwork of that finalized. Autonoma deck, for those who don't know, is a 1-player version. It's like a deck that acts as a kind of as an AI that you can play against. So you're going to include one of those decks in this as well, so you can do a tower defense single-player version, which the original game didn't have. It plays really awesome. I've never won it, but I'm sure someone will. The challenge I'm running into right now is my original plan was to launch this in October. I don't think October is feasible now, given that it's August and we still are preparing for Essen. If we launch this fall, now I'm going to say if, because again, I won't launch unless I'm ready. And that was the biggest learning I've had of doing campaigns over the past number of years, is don't get tempted by the rush, right? Yeah, a lot of times you're like, it's just, I set this timeline in my head and, we just got to do it. That's the worst thing you can do, because your campaign's going to underperform. You're better to push it off and make it perform better. What I'm running into is our current launch, our map of kind of how we're going to do our launches is so packed over the next 3 years. If I don't launch this fall, then I think I'm in a position where I then have to decide, do I launch this or the small box games in the spring? And then I have to choose of those two, which do I believe will be the larger campaign? Because again, it's a business. You still have to make money, which then can help you advertise more for the next big campaign that you do. And that next big campaign, the one that really will count, because I think a game like this will probably do 60 to 80,000, I think, is what Thanks But No Thanks would probably generate, just based on the type of game it is and knowing how kind of Kickstarter works, or how I think it works, I guess. The next kind of big campaign that I think would do the same sizes, or maybe probably even more than Cities of Venus, is the Cities of Venus Survivors game. And that one I absolutely want to have launched in the fall of 2024. It is ready. So now we're moving to artwork stage on that. I think the reviewer copies will go out at least 6 months before we even launch that game. Like, that's how good to go we are on that. And that's one I do not want to push out. That one has to go in the fall of 2024. So it puts me in this position. Do I do a Thanks But No Thanks in the fall and rush it, and then do a small box in the spring, then into the following fall, Cities of Venus Survivors? Or do I choose either this or small box to run in the spring, in which case I would have to push this out to 2025, which I don't really want to do, but sometimes you have to do what makes sense, and you got to be methodical in these things. And, I'm trying to do more of that now as a publisher. Is you want to do everything, but you got to be methodical, because if you don't, then you'll have a campaign that just doesn't go well, or you make mistakes, right? Or people aren't happy with the way it ran. So we have a pretty good track record right now, and we want to kind of continue that track record where, for the most part, people seem pretty happy with how we've performed in terms of fulfilling our promises exactly as we have promised. And if something is not right, we make it right. A perfect example of that was the 48-hour bonus that we had for people that did Cities of Venus. They were going to get a free first player marker, but then we end up giving this to everybody. So then we went and create something else still to give those guys. So they still got their free mini, but they also got something else additional to make that right. And I'm actually going to be sharing that on my next. I should be getting it in a couple weeks, but the wings, I can't wait to show those. They look super cool. 3-dimensional zinc alloy. Oh man, I think people are going to be really happy with them. I'm hoping to have those so I can actually show them off at Essen, but we'll see. David is asking, how many Venus games do we want to release? Well, Dave, we put out an actual, what do you call those? Not iconographs, but we actually have like a graphic we put out that shows exactly the release schedule for that. So Cities of Venus is the one that just finished, right? And that one, I think we're going to actually sub-brand that one on the box as Lost Contact, just so every game actually has, because they're going to be Cities of Venus because of the trademark, and then a sub-name. So that one will be Cities of Venus Lost Contact. That, my hope, is delivering in the summer of 2024, which will be 3 months early, is my hope. Then we have Cities of Venus Survivors, which continues that story, and you're basically on the surface as a mech, one of these guys, and you're trying to find pods that land on the surface, collect them all, get a reascent vehicle, and then try to get back up to the clouds. It's a polyomino dice manipulation game, dice drafting, which is playing very well. The feedback on that game is good. Great, actually, I'd say. Then at some point, either next year or the year after, it depends on when it's ready, we have Architects, so Cities of Venus Architects, which is a roll and write. And that one, the concept behind that, and it's Stephen Hill is the designer, is you will be acting as an architect, doing kind of the design of the city and the different departments. So there'll be different maps in the same game. So one map and one objective will be, okay, everybody's playing to design the greenhouse. Then another map you're designing the power center. Another map you're designing the V-Night refinery. So I think we'll probably have at least 3, but maybe 6 maps in that. And again, we're still toying around with do we soft launch it as a print and play, or do we and then come follow up with an actual hard copy, or do we launch it as a book, maybe a lay flat book, kind of like I think Sagrada recently did a book where you had different levels, something like that. We're still kind of working at the details and the timing of that. We want to make sure it's just perfect. And again, it's not something we're in a rush. So right now, I could see that coming out probably at the same time as Survivors, as an add-on, or we have it as its own standalone game, maybe in one of the in-between months, or we just do a straight booking through our email list. I'm not really sure exactly how we're going to roll that out, it's all going to depend on the timelines on that. We also have then we signed on the very talented Kevin Levy, and he's doing Cities of Venus Civil War, which again is pretty far along. That one's been in development for 5 years. We took his game, which was Mars based, and we reskinned it because it fit our story quite perfectly. You know, you have these warring floating cities competing for limited resources that are left on the planet, and they're actually battling with each other. So that one is not Euro style. That one's very much American style, where you are attacking the other person. Again, with a board. We're going through that stage right now, and I think probably in the upcoming videos we'll actually start teasing out some of the details from that game as well. But we'll have boards in that game as well, where you're actually slotting in your upgrades on how, like your increased thrusters, increased mining capability, different weapons that you can use to try to take out your opponents. And he's done a lot of great work on that game. It is cool. We played that at Origins, and he and I had been talking before that, but after I was able to actually see it and play it at Origins, I realized it was a perfect fit for the family. So that comes in. And then the last one is, last one so far, I'll say, you never know, we could keep going with the story, is Time Splicers. And again, I don't have the top of that. I don't know why I never took the top of any of these games to have on camera. So I've got the back of all these boxes. But Time Splicers, which, again, is not technically on Venus, but it's part of that universe because it's the event that happened that caused us to lose contact. So, and that one, again, the timing on that one, I'm not fully certain on. It'll probably, as I said, probably be part of the small box campaign because it's a small card box. And if we do that, that could be even next year and next summer or next spring. And then the intent is when we get to the kind of final game, so Cities of Venus Civil War, is there'll be a big box that we'll have for that all the games will kind of fit into. And I think that'd be kind of cool to have it on a shelf to actually see the whole series. And that's the story as it is right now. But I do strongly believe there's opportunity for this story to go out across graphic novels. I could see other type of game iterations with this. The one thing we promise we won't do is we won't repeat mechanics, so to speak. So the idea is that if you are ever playing a Cities of Venus, for lack of a word, campaign, so if you're having a Cities of Venus night, where you're saying, okay, guys, let's play these in chronological order in the universal timeline of like where they fit in the story, that game is, or that night is a night where you've played very different standalone games, but all part of the same story. And I think that'd be kind of cool, right? So you start off playing a roll and write, then you move to playing kind of this worker allocation placement resource gathering game we have, which is the core Cities of Venus game. Or maybe before you do that, you do you start off the architects, then into the Cities of Venus. Maybe right after that, you go to Time Splicers, then you hop over to the Survivors, then you go into playing Civil War at the end of the night, and that spans across like 8 hours. That would be kind of cool. I think that'd be fun. I'm hoping that this becomes something that continues on for several years. At least we've got enough content to last the next 3 to 5. But depends on how excited people get by it. I could see this thing keep expanding out further and further. And that doesn't even include the card packs. So our plans for Cities of Venus is to come with refresher decks where you could take the cards you're using, put them off the side, and use a refresher deck that fits in the boards and allows you to kind of refresh your objectives and your events and kind of change the story up. So you're still playing the same game, but it has a fresh feel to it. And our intent is to have those available in different waves as the demand is there. So lots of stuff to keep us busy and keep us excited. And I hope people understand how excited I am. I think I kind of put that across in how I talk about this, but it's infectious because when I see somebody else get excited about the game, it gets me even more excited. And it's like, okay, now how can I tap into that and do something even more to enhance it? So I want to thank everybody for being part of this journey. It's been awesome. I'm going to keep these updates coming. As you know, I am transparent. So I'll just like tonight tell you when I've had feedback that wasn't so great. I'll tell you times when I've got a board and I'll do it live on air and you can see look at my face when something's not working, and I'll talk about how I'm going to deal with that with the manufacturer. It's important to be part of that process with us, so that you know that we care, and quality is important to us. So, anyways, everyone, thanks again, and stay tuned for our next update. Take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.